Most hunters know they need points. Fewer know what those points are actually buying. They spend years stacking up preferences in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. Every year they add to the pile. But when someone asks, what can I actually draw right now with what I have? Most of them can't answer. That's what this one's about. We pulled 2025 draw results across all 5 states, 3 species, elk, deer, and pronghorn, and mapped out what percentage of hunts are actually accessible to non-residents at each point level. Not what you could draw in theory. What the data says drew last year. A few things to note before we get into it. Wyoming figures are from the non-resident preference pool, the part of the draw that matters if you're not a Wyoming resident. Utah, Arizona, and Nevada floors are non-resident specific. Colorado is the exception. Colorado data is resident floors. Non-residents generally need to add somewhere between 5 and 10 points on top of those numbers on competitive units. With that established, let's dig in. Starting with 0 to 3 points. This range is wider than most people expect, and the reason is Wyoming deer. Half of all Wyoming non-resident deer draw slots are accessible at the random floor. 0 points. That reflects the volume of doe, antlerless, and whitetail unit hunts that don't have significant non-resident pressure. Add in some antlerless elk units, and you're looking at roughly 39% of Wyoming non-resident elk draws accessible at 3 points or under. 65% of deer. Colorado looks almost recklessly open at this level. 83% of elk and deer hunts show resident floors at 3 points or under. Non-residents need to add some points for the contested units, but even with that adjustment, Colorado is the most volume-accessible state for hunters early in their point building. Nevada deer reaches 34% accessible by 3 non-resident points. Arizona deer hits 35%. Nothing significant in Utah for non-residents in this range. Moving to 4 through 7 points. This is where Wyoming pronghorn turns the corner. By 7 points, 52% of Wyoming non-resident pronghorn draws are accessible. Elk hits 58%. You're in the core of the Wyoming preference pool here. This is the range you've been building toward. Nevada earns its keep in the 4 to 7 band. By 7 non-resident points, you've unlocked 42% of elk draws, 69% of deer draws, and 72% of pronghorn. Nevada doesn't get the conversation Wyoming or Arizona does, but the point-to-opportunity ratio in this range is hard to ignore. Arizona non-resident deer crosses 76% accessible at 7 points. Arizona elk hits 43%, and the bulk of that came from the 4 to 7 band alone. If you've been building Arizona points with an elk tag in mind, and don't have a decade of them yet, this is the band where it starts. Utah is still largely closed for non-residents at 7 points. Elk and deer are both under 10% accessible. The wall is real, 8 through 12 points. Wyoming elk is at 79% accessible. Pronghorn hits 90. If you're sitting on 10 Wyoming points, the vast majority of the non-resident preference pool is in reach. Deer maxed out earlier, so this range is about locking in elk and pronghorn. Utah pronghorn finally shows up. 21% of non-resident draws are accessible by 12 points. It's not a lot, but it's the first meaningful entry point for non-residents in Utah at any level. Elk and deer are still largely inaccessible, 7 and 12% respectively. Arizona elk climbs to 72% by 12 non-resident points. Nevada elk reaches 63%. If you've been building points in either state, 8 to 12 is when the draw legitimately starts. 13 through 19 points. Utah starts to flip on slowly. Non-resident elk reaches 27% accessible at 19 points. Deer crosses 40%. Pronghorn jumps from 21% at 12 points to 98% by 19. That's not a gradual climb. Utah pronghorn for non-residents has almost no middle ground. Under 8 points, you're locked out. By 13, you're largely in. Arizona elk tops 86% at 19 non-resident points. Nevada elk crosses 81%. Both states have been building toward this range since the 4-point mark. The curve is long, but it's consistent. Wyoming non-resident points are largely maxed out by the top of this band. If you're at 15-plus Wyoming points, you've hit the ceiling of the preference pool. Adding more years isn't opening new doors. It's deepening your position on the hunts already within reach. 20 points and above, Utah is the dominant story up here. Non-resident elk goes from 27% accessible at 19 points to 72% by 24. Deer crosses 81% by 24. If you've been building Utah points patiently and you're past 20, you are finally in the majority of the draw sheet. That's the payoff the system was built around. It just takes a while to arrive. Arizona pronghorn starts at 20 points for non-residents, 17% accessible. By 25 plus, it's essentially 100%. Arizona pronghorn is not a strategy play at any point level under 20, and calling it a strategy play under 25 is generous. This is a lifetime tag for most hunters. Plan for it accordingly. Wyoming has largely exited the picture above 20. The non-resident preference pool maxes out well before that level on every species. So, what does this mean for you? If you're sitting on 0 to 5 points, Wyoming is your best entry. Deer especially, elk with a few points stacked. Colorado is accessible if you're a resident or if you're willing to work a few years for the non-resident premium. Nevada pronghorn and deer are worth a look. People sleep on Nevada when they shouldn't. 6 to 12 points. Wyoming elk and pronghorn are in their core window. Nevada elk is producing. Arizona deer and elk are accessible for non-residents. Utah pronghorn cracks open around 8 points non-resident. Start paying attention to what's drawing in which units, not just whether you can draw at all. 13 to 20 points. Arizona elk is drawn well. Utah pronghorn is open. Utah elk and deer are starting. Wyoming has largely maxed out. If you haven't drawn your Wyoming target yet, the question is whether you're waiting on a specific unit or just waiting. Above 20, Utah elk and deer are the primary play. A large majority of non-resident draws are in range by 24 points. Arizona elk is fully accessible. Arizona pronghorn is finally in sight. The short version, Wyoming rewards. Patience up to about 15 points, then stops. Utah asks for patience longer than most hunters plan for. Arizona splits the difference. Deer and elk open up in the mid-range. Pronghorn is a different machine entirely. Know where your points sit, know what they're buying. That's the whole game. The tag report runs your species, state, and point total against actual draw floor data, unit by unit, not just state averages. $9.99 at the tagprospector.com. This is Percival. Good luck in the draw. Find your vein. The tagprospector.com.